We got a question the other day. We have settled the case. What's the process from here? Well, if you've gone to a mediation or you've just determined the number and both parties agree and you're going to settle the case, what needs to happen is the insurance company will usually hire an attorney, if there isn't one already on the case, to draft what is called a stipulation and settlement agreement. That stipulation and settlement agreement, there's one of two ways they can handle it. If they've never paid you a weekly check, it's called a no liability stip, meaning they're denying everything. They're asking the board to close this file as being denied. You're going to sign off on that. Meanwhile, they will settle for you whatever the agreed settlement amount is. If it is not, if they paid you weekly checks, then the matter has to be what's called a bona fide dispute. And what that usually lists out in the stipulation and settlement agreement is that will list both parties' contentions. The employer contends that the employee is able to return to some form of work. The employee contends they are unable to work in any capacity whatsoever, something like that. But it lists out the contentions and it basically says we're going to put these contentions aside and settle this case for whatever the amount is that you're going to settle. So once that's drafted, you'll review it, you make sure the numbers are right, you make sure everything looks good. There could be some language in there to protect you if you end up having to file for Social Security disability later, depending upon the nature of your injuries. And that's going to be an important part of your Social Security claim. We put language in our workers' compensation claims, or should have language in there, that basically protects you if you do have to file for Social Security disability later. Again, always recommended that you have an attorney whenever you're trying to resolve a Georgia workers' compensation claim. Make sure you're not shorting yourself somewhere else like Social Security disability or anything else for that matter. So once the document is completed, you will go over it and you will sign it. Typically, but not always, the employer will also require what is called a release, releasing them not from workers' comp, but from anything else related to the claim. And they're trying to prevent you from suing them in other ways after they've resolved the workers' compensation claim. And so we talked about the stip, we've talked about the release. Usually they will also ask for a resignation. Well, why do they ask for resignation? Well, they don't want you coming back after you've been injured and re-injuring yourself and getting another settlement, and then re-injuring yourself and getting another settlement. So they will usually resolve the first one, request a resignation in 99.9% of the cases. There are some that they don't. And then it also protects them from if you decide to file for unemployment. By resigning your position, you're no longer entitled to the unemployment, and therefore it kind of closes the door on that. They basically are saying, if we're going to settle this case, we want everybody to go their own way. Once we get the documents completed, you get your check, you go your way, we go ours, we don't cross paths again. And so that's the idea. So once the document is signed by the injured worker, if the injured worker has an attorney, they need to sign it as well. Then they'll send it over to the employer insurer's attorney and they will sign it. And once they sign that agreement, they will file it with the Georgia State Board of Workers' Compensation. Then the settlement division at the Georgia State Board of Workers' Compensation will review the document, make sure it has everything that it needs to have to properly be approved. And then once that occurs, they will send out an email saying this stipulation has been approved. They usually do that to the attorneys. Usually don't necessarily do that to the employees. However, if you have your email filed at the board, maybe they will. I've not been a part of that. Once the stip is approved, if you are receiving weekly checks, your weekly checks will stop the day the stip is approved with the Georgia State Board of Workers' Comp. So it is kind of important that you know what that date is. Once the stip has been approved, the employer and the insurance company have 20 days from that point in time to issue you the lump sum settlement amount. So if you're getting weekly checks, you want to try to save up as much as you can, because once it's approved, those weekly checks will stop. And it could be as long as 20 days. It could be longer. If it's beyond 20 days, the employer or insurer will have to pay penalties. However, it could be a week or two. And so you need to make sure that you have plenty of funds saved up in case you're without income for a couple of weeks. We hope this information has been helpful, and we will see you on the next video.